What do all these drawings have in common? They are stiff. And I'm not talking about the poses. No, I'm referring to the faces. For a while now, I've hated the faces that I draw. Something always just seems off about them. I tried fixing it in a prior video. It helped, but it didn't really change the way I feel about them. But now, I think I know the problem. And if you clicked on this video, you're either very bored or you have the same issue. See, something separates the faces that I draw from the faces that I want to draw. And I believe it's the dynamism, or more accurately, the lack thereof. You know, the expressions, exaggerated or subtle, the interesting perspectives, the storytelling and the features, the swagger? Huh? What? Okay, to be honest, I don't know exactly what it is that makes the faces other people draw look better. Maybe it's all mental, but that's exactly what we're gonna find out. My goal for this is straightforward. I want to improve the faces that I draw, namely by learning to better portray emotions, show the faces from more dynamic perspectives, exaggerate features, and use better shape language. Now that's great, but what I'm really hoping these will help with is in developing my own style, or evolving it further, I guess. Because I think that's another thing my faces lack. They are void of style. Sometimes I draw an eye like this, and other times like this, and it's not on purpose. It's because I don't have a clear-cut way of drawing the eye in any sort of style. And this applies to the rest of the face, even the shape of the head. Also, even though this video isn't exactly a tutorial, if you are actually having the same problems I'm having, then I recommend you follow along and do the things I'm doing. And if you do actually draw along with me, then make sure you tell me in the comments if it actually helped you. So the initial skill test. This is kind of self-explanatory, but it's basically where we just see the level I'm at currently. So I'm going to be drawing a bunch of random faces from imagination, of course. Not using any reference for any of these. Some of them will be exaggerated, some of them will be more subtle, but I'll pretty much draw as many expressions as I can think of. So at first I did this little warm-up just to get back in the swing of things, because it had been a while since I drew on my tablet. But yeah, after that I decided to first see if I could draw just like a perfectly blank expression, like a completely neutral face. So yeah, I did that as best I could. To be honest, it doesn't look perfectly neutral though, now that I'm looking back at it. But after that, I decided to do kind of a more melancholic, I guess, sad maybe, if that's how you interpret it, kind of expression, which I did from the top-down view because I thought that'd be best. It's alright, some of the perspective seems off to me. And then after that, we have a kind of like smug or cocky grin, I guess, with a guy kind of looking down at us. I was making these up on the fly, so I didn't have much time to think of context, but I just did what I could. After that, I decided to go with a slightly more angry look or pissed off look. Which, yeah, it turned out alright. Now, this next drawing with the mouth hanging open. This is something I struggle with a lot, actually, because a lot of the times when I sketch heads or just draw heads in any sort of artwork, I don't usually draw a lot of open mouths, especially from more like complex angles. If you go back and look at my manga where sometimes it has a character like speaking or something, their mouth will be open, but it's like very subtle and it's very slight. So yeah, I don't have a lot of practice when it comes to like mouths stretching open as far as they can, or a guy like yelling, especially from like profile view and stuff like that. I suck at that. So yeah, these two drawings were pretty difficult to do, and I think it's safe to say they look pretty bizarre. And then we have another one with the mouth kind of open, but it's more of a grin like before, so it was a lot easier to do. This angle was still decently tricky, but the good thing about the mouth not being too open is it makes it way easier. And then from there, I decided to draw more like bizarre expressions, I guess. So we have one that I didn't really complete with this kind of fed up look, I guess. I don't even know what the name of this expression would be, but I drew that. I tried to do one with a slight grin again, but realized I already did one like that, so I scrapped it. And then I went on to this like very sad expression, top-down view like the first one I drew, but way less subtle. You know, you can see like the wrinkles on his chin and like the way his mouth is curved. And then we also have like the crying thing. First I decided to draw like the tear streaks using hatching, which I think looks pretty cool, but I also decided to see how it would look if I did it the more like conventional anime or manga way, where the tear streaks are like very clearly defined. And then I also did like an angry or pissed off look, but I decided to do it from the bottom up this time, just to experiment with different angles and stuff. I think it came out pretty good. Then we have another angry look, but it's from more of a 3/5 view, I guess you could say. But yeah, I think you understand what I mean when I say I struggle with mouths being open a lot. Especially at certain angles and for certain expressions, it's just really difficult for me to do. Expressions like when a character is surprised or they're shocked, it's pretty easy because you can pretty much just make the mouth look like a big circle. When it comes to like anger, where it has to be curved a very specific way, or if their mouth is gaping open while they're like crying or something like that, it's very hard for me to do. But yeah, that pretty much wraps up the initial skill test. As you guys can see, I struggle a lot with certain perspectives. My overall like structure of the head and stuff is decently on point. Like I don't think any of these look too bad, but some of them have like very obvious mistakes and things that need to be fixed. So for the tutorial, I went to YouTube and I searched as best I could for videos on the specific topic that I'm looking for. There are obviously a lot of videos on how to draw the face and head and emotions, but out of the many videos that I saw, there was only one that had everything I really wanted. And it was by the same channel that we've had in one of my older videos. I do not know how to say their name still. Jadoker? The Joker? But yeah, a really cool channel, really good artist as well. And this video in particular, oh my god, it's like it was designed for me. I don't know how to explain it. Literally everything I wanted to hear and I thought I needed help with, it addressed. So obviously I'm not going to show you guys the full video. If you do want to see it, go and watch it by yourself. But as I'm actually applying what I learned from the video, I'll give you guys a quick rundown of each step. So the first thing he actually talked about was drawing very simplified expressions in 2D and 3D. And basically when you do this, what happens is you don't really have to worry about like realism or anatomy or art style or any of that stuff, and you can just focus on what makes the expression the expression. And obviously this will be stuff that most people know, but it's stuff that isn't really practiced specifically, at least not in this simple of a way. So you have stuff like the eyes and the curvature of the mouth and the curvature of the eyebrows, face wrinkles, and everything like that. And another good thing about doing it this simply is that not only can I do it very quickly, if something looks off about the expression, I can immediately identify what it is that needs further work. So he drew a lot of these in his video. I decided that I only wanted to draw like very distinct like core expressions, and I left out most of the subtle stuff. But yeah, as you saw, what I first did was I drew like smiley faces or like emojis, that level of simplicity, right? And then step 2 in his video was then trying to translate those like very simple expressions into more realistic stylized faces. But as you saw in the time lapse, I decided to kind of mix those 2 steps in one. So after I drew the simple faces, I decided to do a more realistic version at the bottom. But yeah, like I said, very helpful, and I highly recommend you try and do it yourself. And then I also kept it going like that for the 3D versions. Obviously when you make it 3D, as in like experiment with different angles and stuff, it becomes way more difficult, but it's something that you really need to do, because if you ever want to translate this to like a comic book or even just a basic illustration of any kind, your characters aren't always going to be facing directly into the camera, right? So whether you like it or not, you're going to have to draw these basic angles, and that's something I really wanted to make sure I didn't ignore in this video, because like I said before, if you want to have dynamic looking faces and heads, it's not just the expression, the angle also makes a lot of difference. And then finally we get to step 3 of his video. Now this is very similar to the last 2 steps, but this is kind of when you exaggerate everything. So you kind of push everything to the limits, or even beyond. You narrow down what makes the expression what it is and try and maximize it as much as you can. You know, you make it so the smiling mouth takes up half the face. Not anatomically correct, but it gets a lot of emotion across, which is important. Maybe more important than anatomy and realism. Of course, it depends on you and your style, but you know what I mean. So yeah, first I decided to do the kind of vanilla, like bland expressions, and then I decided to exaggerate them, but still keeping it simple. And then at the end, I decided to stylize it and make it a more finished piece, I guess. And then after that, I went to just drawing faces from imagination with like very bizarre expressions and stuff I had never really done before. You don't see it much in the first drawing, but in the expressions after that, I think it's kind of obvious. So I made one where it's kind of this like weird expression, and I decided to exaggerate it by making it look like his eyes are like popping out of his skull. And then for the last one, which I decided to do kind of a maniacal laugh or anger or whatever this is, I decided to make it so the mouth takes up majority of the lower face. Not my best drawing, but I think it gets the point across, which is important. Now in his video, he also mentioned exaggerating proportions and stuff like that. So if you don't already know, the basic human face, or like, you know, like the average human head, is kind of divided equally among 3 parts. The first third is the top of the head to the eyebrows. The second third is from the eyebrows to the bottom of the nose, and the third bit is from the bottom of the nose to the bottom of the chin. But if you look at a lot of character designs, or what people do in cartoons, or even in some anime like One Piece and stuff like that, the artist will usually make one of these portions like bigger than the rest or smaller than the rest. You might have it so the middle is very big and you have these very long noses, or the chin is very big, or maybe it's very wide or stuff like that. Now this is a really good thing to do if you want really unique looking character designs and faces and heads, and if you just want your drawings of the face and head to look better or more interesting. But when I did it, it didn't turn out that good. And I think the main problem with how I did it is that I decided to push the proportions and make the faces look really cartoony, but I drew the facial features semi-realistically, so it didn't really work out. If I made the facial features look more cartoony, I think it would have worked, but the way I did it, not really. Now I'd already looked at a tutorial, and since I couldn't find any other like good tutorials for what I wanted specifically, I decided what I should do instead was just find some interesting references and try to not really copy them, but just learn from them. And what better reference to use for expressions than anyone from Gachi Akuta. This series is art, specifically in the manga. The anime is good, but I'm talking about the manga. Some of the most interesting faces and expressions you will ever see. And it was kind of my inspiration behind making this video. I basically want to be able to draw expressions as freely and as dynamically as in that series. So I decided to use some of the faces as reference. I was obviously copying them, but I wasn't really trying to recreate the drawing or draw the characters or anything like that. I just wanted to try drawing the exaggerated features from the references in hopes that I can kind of learn new ways to draw certain things and be able to recycle that knowledge for the future. And I think it worked. Obviously, you have a lot of like bizarre facial expressions that I'm drawing here, and I actually learned a surprising amount from this. I mean, first and foremost, I learned a lot of new facial expressions that I didn't even think were possible, so that's cool. But I also noticed how in a lot of these drawings, the facial features are so like squashed and stretched. I mean, that's kind of a given for if you want to exaggerate expressions, like a lot of artists do it, right? But in this case, it's like the way the facial features or like the eyes are stretched, it's like they're pointing in a direction. I don't know how to explain it. It's like they're being stretched in the direction of motion. It's kind of weird to explain, so hopefully you get it. But hopefully if you look at the first one I drew, it makes sense. I don't think there's a single expression here that I dislike. Obviously the first one and the third drawing with like the gritted teeth are fairly standard, but even with those, they're made to look so unique, and the expressions just have so much like life in them. And then obviously the last drawing is like the most famous expression from that series. You've probably seen it before. The mouth is literally so wide open, it goes past the jaw, like. But my favorite definitely has to be the second one. I don't even know what you would call that expression. What is that? Okay, so the final thing I wanted to learn in this video, this is most likely something you've heard of if you ever tried to learn how to draw like characters or do character design or anything like that. Shape language is basically all about the feelings or emotions invoked by certain shapes and designs. You know, so if you have a circle or a sphere, it's very round and it feels gentle and I don't know, kind and cuddly. So if you use that a lot for designing a character, they'll feel really gentle and kind and all the things I said before. Whereas if you use like a triangle, it's very pointy and aggressive and dominant, and it feels evil. It's an evil shape. Let's kill all triangles. So if you use that in a character, they'll have a very sinister look about them and they'll feel pointy? What? And then if you use like a square or a cube, it's a very strong shape and That's all I got for squares. But as you can see in the first thing I drew, where I made the character look very boxy, and I tried to use a lot of angular lines and square shapes in his features, it really tells you a lot about his character, and it even kind of teaches you about his personality before you even heard him speak or see him do anything. You know, you can kind of grasp the kind of character he is just from the design. Now, there's two things you should note about this. The first thing is that you can obviously push this thing further. Like, if you want a boxy looking character, you can pretty much just make the entire head a rectangle. If you want a pointy character, you can literally just make them a triangle. But that would make it look really cartoony, which isn't a problem. But like I said at the beginning of this video, I'm also trying to practice my own style and make sure that no matter what I'm drawing and how exaggerated it gets, it still has a certain look about it that lets you know I drew it, which is why I decided to kind of tone it down. And the second thing you should note is that this is very, very basic character design. If you design characters like this using shape language, where it's basically like they're modeled after a certain shape, their character will come out very flat. It'll be a very one-dimensional character. So what most character designers do is, even if they design a character with like rounder features, like it's modeled after a circle, they'll, I don't know, give them some spiky hair, or they'll give it some more triangular elements as well. And what this kind of hints at in terms of the character's personality is, yes, they're maybe a kinder character, a more caring, gentle person, but maybe they also have a more competitive side to them. So there's nothing wrong with doing this, but if you want more like sophisticated characters, try mixing a bunch of shapes instead of just one. So now the big question: did I improve? Short answer, yes. Long answer, yeah. I don't know. Obviously, with the tutorial I watched and everything I learned from it, it's gonna take a while for me to fully practice everything from that video and get to the point where I'm comfortable just cranking these out left and right. But even in terms of like short-term progress, I think I improved a lot. Looking at the faces and more specifically expressions I produced at the end versus the beginning, it's obvious how much more comfortable I am doing these, even from more dynamic and crazy perspectives, versus the beginning where everything kind of felt stiff and awkward. So yeah, thank you guys for watching the video. If you were actually following along with me, then make sure you let me know in the comments. But yeah, like and subscribe if you enjoyed, and I'll see you guys in the next video.